Hello and welcome to STW's third training video on CoDeSys version 3. The version of CoDeSys I'm using in this video, again, is version 3.5 patch 5. My name is Joe Stevenson, and in this section we are going to go over how to connect to the gateway server for a login to the controller via CAN bus. So we're going to look over how to set up that gateway and then how to log in live so we can see real-time data and verify that our logic is working the way we think it's working from our program. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the 3XL configuration, so double-click SX3XL, and we're going to go to configuration. So you want to make sure your login type is set as CAN bus 1. Any CAN bus really will work, but typically we just use CAN bus 1 if available. So that tells us that the program knows we're looking to communicate with it on CAN bus 1 for login. The next step is to configure the gateway. Now, before we scan the network to find the controller on the gateway server on the CAN bus, we need to configure the gateway config file so that it knows that we're looking to use the CAN network to communicate on. So go to Help, STW Directories and Files, and go to the Gateway PLC directory. This will take you to the directory where the gateway config file is, and that's right here. And then you can see these three templates. So there's one for CAN, Serial, and Serial and CAN. We're just looking to communicate on CAN. So I'm going to right-click and open that with my editor. I have Notepad++. It's a good editor, or easy to use editor, I should say. So Control-Alt to select everything, Control-C to copy, and then I want to open Gateway Config, and I'm just going to paste that data in there. So I'm going to Control-A, delete everything, and just paste what I had in there from the other one. So now the gateway is configured with the data from the CAN gateway file. So the standard Gateway 1 is now the way it should be. It's set up for CAN login. If you wanted to use serial login, you would copy the contents of the serial file into the gateway config file. So we can close this out now. We can come to our gateway, and then we click Scan Network. So it's going to scan and try and find controllers on the bus. So look, it found my controller that's running on a CAN bus, and I am connected with a peak CAN dongle. So that's where the communication between my computer and the controller is coming from. So what I'll do is I'll click Set Active Path so it knows I want to use this controller. And now we're ready to log in and see what's going on this program. So I can either click this login shortcut here or do online login. And we get some green boxes here, and now it says Run down here, and we can see some real data. Now you can see right here this counter is incrementing because of this piece of logic right here, counter +1. So we can see that's working. You can see variables up here on the top area, so the variables for this POU and the current values of them. We can see our function block in two places. We can see it right here, and it's got data for the inputs and outputs, or we can come up here where we declared it and expand it out and look at the data here. So now keep your eye up here. These are the two inputs, which again, remember I tied to digital input 1 and digital input 2. And then the output is writing to PWM output 1. So keep your eyes up here, and remember the logic for this was that if input 1 and 2 are both true, the output is going to be 5,000, or half of our max value, which was set up here for our PWM. So 10,000 was set as the max value, so 5,000 would be half of the max, or 50% PWM. So I come back here, and I will switch the first input on. So that goes to true, but the output is still 0 because both outputs are on. Now let me turn the other output on. And now we see 5,000. So that's our logic at work. So it's reading both inputs as true, and it sets the output. And my LED for output 1 is on, which is good, so that means it's working. This is you're also have the ability to force values. And so let's see, if I wanted to come here and just restart this counter for whatever reason, I can double click on the variable right here and it shows you the current value at that time. And I can prepare a new value and just click 0 or type 0, click enter or click OK, and now this shows you the prepared value, and I hit debug write value. So it's going to write it one time, and there you see it starts over at 0. This works for internal variables that aren't hardwired to outputs or inputs. So if I tried to write a value to this input, and I try and write 0 to it, debug write, it might write it for one cycle, but since the hardware is still connected to a digital input which is reading high, it's going to still be a 1 here. Now if I try and force it, let's see what happens. Enter 0 and I click force value. It's going to force a 0, and you can see that input 1 went false. Even though the hardware is reading it as true, it's been overwritten here to be false. So I can release that force, and it should go back to the correct values. So that's logging in. This is very useful to see real-time data. Very, very good for debugging. Let me log out, and I'll show you that there's also a simulation mode. We can go online and simulate, and this will not use the CAN bus at all. It'll just simulate the logic in Windows. So I can go to online and log in. And I want to proceed, and it's going to get me logged in on the local network here on its own simulation, and I have to start it myself here now to get it going. So I click debug and start, and you can see again the counters are running, and here with FBIO nothing's happening with my digital inputs because they're not connected to anything. So I can write the value here now if I wanted. I guess I have to click it down here. So I could write a 1 here, and I can write a 1 here. I do write values, so then it wrote the values to that, and I can test the logic here on my own without having to get it connected to hardware. So it's really good to test function blocks you've written or any logic you have that you don't, if you can't have access to a controller for whatever reason, simulation mode is very handy. So that concludes the tutorial for logging in and getting into a live login to show real-time data and see what's going on. The last video we're going to do is going to cover some common problems and some problems as well that you might encounter when you're logging in with the gateway. So please move on to the next video. Thank you very much.